Welcome to the third lesson and the final lesson of doing this bid by hand. In the previous lessons we learned how to navigate through the plans and specs to find all the areas that are going to apply to you in doing the bid. We also went through how you do your takeoff to get all the material that you need and all the labor that you need in order to price your bid. Now, an estimate is really time and material plus admin and overhead and profit. Now, what we're going to go through on this last lesson is how you get your pricing, how you put together your request for quotes. There's some samples in your package that you're going to see. I gave you a sample of the takeoff sheets of how you should put those together, but you can put them together however works for you, as long as you get the vital information that you need for your quote. And also there's going to be a sample of the bid scope letter, and there's a sample of labor calculations. Okay, but you're going to find that with each company that you work with, your labor is going to adjust to how their crews work. Okay, all right, let's start off with all the stuff we got from our last lesson, which was all of our takeoffs, so all the materials that we need. Now we need to get pricing on those materials. So what you're going to do is a request for a quote. Now, I do this through email. Some companies do it through faxing. You can do it however is convenient for you. I like the email system because when I send off a metal quote, asking a metal company to give me a price, I usually include sets of the plans, pages from the plans and pages from the specs and things like that, so I know that they're getting it right. And if I am doing casement windows or anything like that, which we don't have in this practice bid, I usually take a copy of those window elevations of the casement windows and things and send those along. Sometimes they're going to a window manufacturer and not a metal manufacturer. Casement windows, things like that, come glazed already, so you don't have to worry about separating everything out. Storefront and curtain wall is usually what messes everybody up on doing estimates, because the windows are fairly easy, because they'll tell you what the manufacturers are that are approved, and they give you an elevation of what the window looks like and the spec telling you about the window, what it's made of. You just send that off to the window manufacturer and he sends you back a price. You still have to do your counts and everything else like we did in the first lesson and second lesson, but you still it's a little easier to do than putting together the storefront and the curtain wall. Now, on the request for quote, what you're going to have to put on the request for quote is for all the metal. Remember, we looked through the catalog and we found the part numbers. Well, all of that information that you did on your takeoff sheet, where you found out how many joints there are, how many cuts, but mainly how much head material, sill material, jam, and mullion material you needed. That is what's going to go into your quote request, because you're going to give them the totals of everything that you need and ask them for a price on it, and ask them to include all of the other little items, end dams, water diverters, and everything else that goes with this system. Now, you can do that just by saying, I'm using a TL series system for Arcadia, which is the catalog we're using right now, and in that system I need so many feet of head for a shear block system. And because you know you had the shear block, the can stick, and the screw spline or screw race joinery, different types. It doesn't really matter unless they specifically say they want shear block. In this case, you take the one that you're most comfortable with, either using the screw spline, the shear block, or the can stick. In this case, we did the screw spline, the screw race joinery. So you're going to tell them in that you're going to give them every part that you need and the links you need. The other way to do it is to make it a little easier on yourself, is just say, I need the TL series 2 by 4.5 inch storefront outside center glaze, and you want so many feet of head, so many feet of jam, so many feet of seal, so many feet of vertical mullion, and so many feet of horizontal mullion. Alright, now that goes into your email or your fax where you're requesting the materials that you want to price on. And they're going to send you back a quote with a price on it, and they're going to list all of the things that they're giving you in that quote. And that's when you double check against your takeoff sheet to make sure you've got everything you needed. If you needed 200 feet of head material, then you're going to check to see those part numbers, did they give you 200 feet of that in their quote. There are estimators that just send the plans off to a manufacturer and they do the estimate for them. It's okay, but you never know if they got everything, and you also they're going to add things to it because they want to sell you more. Okay, I don't recommend doing that, but if you're in a pinch, sometimes you can do it. I have had metal companies come back to me and give me a price, and when I checked their materials against the materials I'd asked for, it was different. And when I called them on it and asked them about it, they said, oh, well, we'd already done a quote for somebody else, so we just gave you the same quote. That's something that you don't want to do because you don't know whether the other guy got it right or not. You're going to have to depend on yourself that you found everything. Okay? So that's why I recommend doing it this way, because you're going to know that you found everything and how much material you need. You're not relying on somebody else to tell you how much material you need. You can rely on them to just give them the amount of head, seal, jam, and mullion that you need, and ask them to provide all the setting blocks, water diverters, vinyls, and stuff that go with it. And that's easy enough. Now, so we've got our metal bid that's going to be ready to go. So you simply create a letter or on email requesting a quote, and you attach your takeoff list of what you're asking for. And they will come back then with a quote at a price that you can use. Now, the glass is done a similar way. That's why we went through and found out how many pieces of glass we need of what sizes. And so when we send off the request for quote there, we're going to say we need, in this case, dual pane low E silver tinted 1-inch insulated glass in these sizes and quantities. Now they will come back to you with a price, and that's the price you're going to use when you start putting your bid together. So the third part of this puzzle for money is labor. And we went through a little bit on figuring labor. But I'm going to put a sample in there of a labor calculation with all of the things that I told you I used so that you could use them yourself. But as you start bidding, you're going to start developing your own figures of the company you're working for, how fast they work, and how much time they need for different things. Labor is where money is made or lost on these bids, because everybody's paying pretty much the same amount for materials. But everybody's labor is different. What they pay their employees is different. What their burden is different. I mean, some companies offer insurance, some don't. And you have two types of bids that you're going to do as far as labor goes in pricing. Now, in labor, one of the things is just straight labor, non-union. The other is called prevailing wage, or a union job. You can have a prevailing wage job and have it not be a union job, because if your shop's not union, you wouldn't be able to bid on it anyway. But any state or local government job is going to be a prevailing wage job. And that means that you have to look up your labor amounts in the Davis-Bacon Act, or you can look up prevailing wages for that area, and they will give you what the lowest rate you can pay and all the fringe benefits that are included in that has to go in. That's called burden. You have, like, if you pay somebody $20 an hour to install, the burden for you then is you have to match the Social Security and Medicare, which is 7.65% that you have to add on. You usually have some type of unemployment insurance and some type of workers' compensation. So those percentages have to be added on to the hourly rate. Now, if it's prevailing wage, there'll be a lot of other things they'll add in there, and they're called fringes. But everything above the rate you pay the person is called burden. And so you've got to make sure you have all those figures in there when you figure your hourly rate. So you know that the least you're going to pay is whatever you're paying that person an hour plus the 7.65% of that you have to match. And you're probably going to have some type of state unemployment insurance, 1 to 2%. But you'll need to find out from the company you're working for what their burden is. We're going to talk about the labor calculation here. In your labor, I always consider a man-hour to be one installer and one helper. So you're going to get a price for your installer and your helper. Now, when you're using prevailing wage like that, or whatever, you're still going to take your hourly rate, the way we're talking about, plus burden. All right, so the burden on a labor rate is like the Medicare and Social Security that your company has to match. Maybe unemployment insurance, which is 1 or 2%, maybe workers' comp, some other things like that that you have to add on. That's called burden. So the purposes of this bid, we're going to place the burden at 12%. So if your installer is costing you $20 an hour, you're going to multiply that times 1.12 to give you a 12% burden, and that comes out to $22.40. Now, say your helper is costing you $12 an hour, so you're going to do the same thing with him, and you're going to multiply that $12 an hour by 1.12, which is going to give you $13.44. All right, when you add all that together, it comes up to $35.84. I like to fudge that a little bit and add a couple of bucks, so I'm going to make that an even $38 per hour of labor. Okay, so my man-hour cost is $38 an hour. Now, we went through the calculations on the labor, and we found that we came close to 120 hours. So we're going to set our labor at 120 hours. So you're going to multiply that 120 hours times the $38, which is going to give you, let's just do it, 38 times 120. It's going to give you $4,560 in cost. All right. Now, when we get down to the end, you're going to do labor separate than you do profit for materials. Okay, because in labor you're going to add your 15% for overhead and administration. Okay, so if you're marking the job up 25%, you're going to add another 15% on the labor. So the labor you mark up separately. Now, I've given you a spreadsheet on this that will automatically do that, but I want you to know how to do it by hand. So you take the 4560 and you multiply that. If instead of 25%, you do it 1.40. And that gives you a total labor cost of $6,384. Okay, so that's the price you're going to put on your final report for labor. And when you've added together the other things that you've got, the material and the glass and the doors and the metal, and you add that in, that's gonna bring up the other part of this thing, because you've got 2,400, 1,800, and 4,500. So let's just do that: 2,400, 1,800, and 4,500, which brings a total of $8,700 for materials. Okay. Now, one last thing you're going to add to that is going to be shop drawings, and if you need lifts or anything. So in this case, we're going to say we need a lift because these things are 9 feet high, and so we're going to put in a fee of $350 to cover lift rental for that time. So to the $8,700, we add $350. Gives us $9,050. Okay. And now to that, we're also going to add the shop drawings, because we're going to have to do shop drawings for this. And so with this size of project, with these things, I would imagine you're going to add about $1,000 for shop drawings. Okay, so now your total cost on materials and everything else is $10,050. Okay, so what you do now is now you're going to take that figure and you're going to add profit to it, which is going to be 25%. So we take that figure and we multiply it by 1.25, which gives us the total figure of $12,562. $12,562.50. Okay, so here's your material with a markup, and here's your labor with a markup. So you got your labor at $63.84. And what you do here is add the $63.84 to your material price, and your total bid comes up to $18,946.50. We never put cents on a bid scope, so we're going to just mark that up to $18,947. Okay, so $18,947 is your final bid. Now we're going to talk about how you put that into a bid scope next. Now we're going to talk about the bid scope, preparing your bid scope. The bid scope is the actual proposal that you're putting out to the general contractor with your bid price and telling them exactly what you're going to do for that bid price. Now, in your package, I have given you a sample bid scope for this training section. And if you pull it up now, print it out so you can set it in front of you and look at it as we go. I've put everything in it right now, but it's a Word document, so if you have Word, you can go in and make changes however you want to do it. But let's get down to the brass tacks of what's needed for the bid scope. In the bid scope, you're going to tell that general contractor everything about your bid. And you start with the very first thing up there. You're going to tell them what is the project that you're bidding. Okay? So under regarding, that RE with a colon means regarding this project. So this is the burn reconstruction project in Las Vegas, Nevada. Okay? Now, this was an actual project, but the plans were given to me by the architect to use for this training session. Now, the first thing you're going to find in there is you're going to tell them this is the burn reconstruction project, Las Vegas, Nevada. All right. Then the date, you're always going to put in the date the bid is due. So if you're producing it that day, that's today's date. But it's always the date the bid is due. So if that's the 20th of December 2011, that's what you're going to put in there for the date. Now, underneath the date is going to be the bid documents. And you'll see that I've got a line there. It says bid documents, and these are all of the bid documents used to produce our proposal. Now, the first thing you're going to have under that is the architectural drawings and what date they have. Now, if you go to the cover page of any set of drawings that you're using, any of the plans that you're using, you're going to see on usually the bottom right-hand corner, there's going to be a list of dates. And sometimes there'll be 4 or 5 dates in there. In this case, there's only the one. But if they had to update anything, if there were addendums or anything like that, they had to submit those plans to the city for approval, and there'll be a date that was approved. The latest date is the one that you use because you've seen everything. Anytime an addendum comes out, which you'll see we have addendums underneath there, an addendum is a change to the plans or the specs in some form or fashion. Some type of change to the bid documents, okay? Anytime there's a change to the plans, there'll be a new date. So you would have to look at the addendum set of plans to see if there's a new date. In this case, our training set didn't have any addendums. So we're working strictly off of the cover sheet of the original set of plans. So you'll notice that date is June 7th of 2010. So you always put it in with 06/07/2010. And for 2000s, I always recommend putting in the full 2010 for a few more years anyway. Now, underneath that is the specifications and what date they had. Now, your specifications will sometimes have a date. When they don't, you use the date of the bid set of the plans. If the specifications have a date, it'll be at the bottom of the page, usually on the right-hand corner. And it'll list a date that those specifications were pulled. Architects like to do things like cut and paste things, so they sometimes put a set of specs together without actually dating anything. So they might have a date on one page from wherever they pulled those specs from. But just remember that you're saying, these are the ones that I used, these are the specifications that I used to do this bid, okay? Now, after the after the specification dates, you're going to have the plan pages that you used to do this bid. Now you notice on here we say CS because we include the cover page, and it says CS through A 8.2 because that's the last page that we use. So all the pages between CS and A 8.2 were used in this bid. If you find out that you only use certain pages, maybe you only use 3 pages, then you put the 3 pages that you used. But I always put all of them because I look at every page anyway to make sure it doesn't pertain to me, okay? But I don't not include it just because it didn't have anything for me there, because I did have to look at it to see if it did affect me. Okay, after that you're going to have sections, and sometimes bids are set up into phases or sections, and at some point a section may not apply to you. And in some cases you'll have The sections you didn't use were the electrical or the plumbing or the mechanical. But a lot of times openings are going to include some of the mechanical and some of the electrical, so I always say all unless it definitely does not pertain to me. And then if I'm only using architectural plans, then I'll put architectural there instead of just all. But I generally look at the other plans too to see if any of them affect me, because sometimes you'll have pipe vents going through a window. And in a lot of older buildings you're going to find that a lot, where a vent pipe or something goes through a window. And it does affect you, because that section you won't put glass in, but you will build the window frame itself. Okay, so I always say all on the section. The last thing on that top part is the addendums. Now, if you receive an addendum, it might affect what you're doing. Even if it doesn't affect what you're doing, you need to acknowledge that you saw those addendums. Okay, if you didn't, it's a place for you to come back later and say, whoa, that price is no good because you didn't put out addendum 4 until after I had already submitted my bid. Okay, addendums, you can have 20 addendums on a bid, but most of the times you'll have none. In this case we had none, so we say none. There were no addendums. Okay, all right, now we get down to the important part, which is the scope of work itself. This is the part that is going to tell that general contractor what you're going to do and for how much money you're going to charge to do it. So we always break things down into line items. So all storefront is one line item. If I have storefront and curtain wall, I'll have 2 line items, one for storefront and one for curtain wall. I like to tell them approximately how many square feet we're doing. In this case, we just have storefront, so our line 1 is the storefront that we're going to install. And in that, we have actually 476 square feet of storefront. But I rounded up a little bit just to cover myself and say approximately 500 square feet of storefront. And I tell them which storefront I'm using. I'm using an Arcadia TL200 series. And then I tell them what size that is. That's 2.5 by 4 inch storefront. And in this case, we're using clear anodized finish. So I tell them that too. And then I also say we're going to glaze that, and in this case, we're going to glaze that with the silver tinted glass. So we'll tell them in this case that it is 1 inch insulated silver tint finish. Okay. Now, the second line that we're using in this bid is for the doors. Now, I always tell them which doors and what sizes they are. So line 2 is going to be that we're doing 3 storefront doors, and they are all 3.0 by 7.0 standard storefront. And then I list the door markers. Now, you remember when we looked at the door schedule page, the marker number is that number out there where we said we were looking for door number 6. Door number 6 is a marker number, and you remember they're circled on the floor plan, and then they correspond to the door schedule. So in this bid scope, we're telling them we're doing 3 storefront doors, 3.0 by 7.0, and the markers are 1, 3, and 6. Okay, so there's no doubt which doors we're saying we're going to do, because a lot of times you'll get a general contractor that'll get that bid from you, and if you're close to the bottom, he'll come back and say, hey, did you get this or did you get that? Did you remember this? The more you spell out on your bid scope, the better off it's going to be for you when you're answering his questions. Because if he says, did you get door number 4, you already know you didn't get door number 4 because it's not listed as a storefront door. But in our business, sometimes hollow metal frames, general contractors confuse that with us and aluminum. Hollow metal is a different aspect. It's usually steel, but sometimes there's hollow metal aluminum, and general contractors are not glazing specialists, so a lot of times they'll ask you, did you get this or did you get that? And you'll know from your bid that you didn't. This is going to help your project manager and the owner of the company when they're negotiating a contract. Okay? And if they come up with something that you should have seen, you'll find out there too. And you can say, no, I didn't have it. Like they might ask you, did you get the mirrors in the bathrooms? In some cases, you might do mirrors. Your company might do mirrors. But in a lot of cases, mirrors in the bathroom are done by toilet accessory companies. When they put in the partitions and everything else, they also put in the mirrors. But it never hurts to bid them sometimes. You might get it. In bigger jobs like condos and things like that, you might have mirrors in all the bathrooms that they want you to bid separately because you might be able to do it less than the toilet accessory company can do. But in this case, we're not putting any mirrors in the bathroom. As far as we can tell from the plans, there are no mirrors going in the bathroom. They're not remodeling the bathrooms. Okay. Now, you've told them there everything that you're going to do for this bid. And in some cases, like I said, you might not get all of the, you might have 10 or 12 line items, all different things. Because you might have an all-glass door entrance, okay? You might have some all-glass sections that are different than storefront, like you see in a mall, where it's just all half-inch glass all across the front and there's no framing, it's butt glazed. And you might have 10-foot tall, 4-foot wide, all-glass doors with rails and things. Those you'll do separately. In this case, we didn't have any of those, but those are things that come up, and I would put those on a separate line item. Anything that does not fall into one category, when in doubt, create a separate line item. Okay? Now, on the bid scope itself, you're also going to put down here, we're going to do this, all of this above, for this price. So it says, in our scope, it says all for the sum, and then we put the price in. Now, you remember we rounded up, so it was $18,947 because we don't use cents in our bid. Now, the last thing on the bid scope is going to be your exclusions, because you need to spell out what you're not doing, okay? So you want to look at that and see if there's anything in there that might be construed to be your responsibility, but you're not including on this bid. One of the prime ones that comes up on are on automatic sliding doors, things like that to go into supermarkets and things, because generally Bessem and Stanley and all the automatic door manufacturers will install those themselves. However, they will not install the glass in the frame around it. So you would have a line item separately in there, and for that, if you had an automatic sliding door, that you were going to provide the glazing for that, but not the installation of the door. So you do need to spell out exclusions at the bottom. Now, I've listed on this one some standard exclusions that you would put in. Like most storefront and curtain wall installers, contractors, do not do motorized doors. They're all done by specialty contractors. So there's certain things that you will exclude. If you had casement windows in this, you'd have another line in there for casement windows. But you don't on this particular bid. So we're going to stick with this bid. But know that every time you do a bid proposal, you need to have a line item to speak to everything that you're doing. So in this case, we have two line items. We're doing the storefront and the doors, and that's it. And we're telling them what kind of storefront, what kind of glass, and what kind of doors. Okay? So now that you've got this done, this becomes your proposal, and that goes on your company's letterhead, and they will either fax it or email it to whoever is going to get the bid. Now, one last thing about that. Generally, you'll receive an invitation to bid from a general contractor. Okay? And that general contractor may be one of 10 that are bidding that job. So one of the things that I like to do is I like to get a hold of the architect and find out how I can get a list of the general contractors bidding this project. Because if you happen to be low, but you only bid to one contractor, he doesn't get the job, it doesn't matter that you're low. But if you're the low bidder and you bid to all of them, the one of those guys is going to get the contract. Okay? So keep that in mind as you go. And I think this is going to make your life easier. So now we have completed the entire bid process, all the way down to producing our proposal. Okay? So now you've taken a bid from start to finish, and you've done it all by hand. So in the bid scope, if you have any questions about this, go back and listen to it again. But it's pretty self-explanatory about what you have to have. You mainly are telling that general, here's what I bid, here's exactly what I'm bidding, and here is where I got the information to create this bid. Okay? Okay, I've provided for you in this section also two worksheets. One, they're both Excel spreadsheets. One is a markup report, and the other is a takeoff worksheet for the metal. Now the takeoff worksheet for the metal, you simply put in the height and the width. It'll give you the square footage, and you put in all of your cuts and joints. It'll total them for you, and also on the head, sill, jam, and mullion material, it'll total them for you. So it's going to save you a lot of time in using this. So take a look at those, pull them up if you have Excel and you can look at them. Pull them up and look at that. Now the other one I provided for you is a markup report. Now in the markup report, it has columns for everything. So this is where you put your quotes in that you got back, those figures. You put your labor in up in the labor section. It's self-explanatory of where things go. Over on the right hand side on the top, you'll have a subcontractor cell, a miscellaneous cell, and in these cells is where you're going to put for lifts and shop drawings and things like that. Now if you look down at the bottom, in the bottom sets, on the left you have your markup. You just put in what your markup percentage is going to be, 25, 20, 35, whatever it's going to be for each item. It will compute it for you and give you your profit totals over on the other side. So you'll notice in the one that I've given you, I've left standard markups in there of 25% for everything and labor at 40%. So you have to go ahead and calculate how many hours and put out your total labor cost and put that up in the labor section, and it'll do it. And take the quotes that you got for the glass, the hardware, the doors, the metal, everything else. If there's something unusual, like you've got aluminum windows or something like that, you just fill in that one of those blank spots that says aluminum window and put the price in there. That will then go ahead and calculate all of your markup for you. So you'll have a complete record of how everything was arrived at. So it'll give you your final number. Down at the bottom will be your final bid number, your markup number. And that's the bid that goes on the bid scope. So I'm hoping that these things will help you get along with this just a little bit easier, and it'll make it a little bit faster for you in doing some of these bids. You won't have to write so much. Okay? So those two things were added, and we might come up with some others down the road that'll help you even further. But when you get to the next set of lessons, we're going to be doing a new bid, but we're going to be using a software program. And this software program is going to make your life a lot easier. It's going to calculate all kinds of things for you. You're still going to have to come back in after you get your quote back and put in the quote numbers to get the actual figures. But it's going to compute all of these other things, perimeter, square foot. It's going to create a parts list for you. You won't have to search catalogs for anything because the catalogs are there. And once you've gone in and done all your stuff on this program, it'll compute everything for you. Give you your parts list for your quotes, give you your glass list and sizes and types. It will compute the labor for you, and it'll tell you where you're off and on. It'll let you put doors in as long as they're standard size doors, and you'll be amazed at what it can do. So the program we're going to use will let you download it free for 30 days to do this lesson with. So I encourage you to go ahead and follow up on that lesson. And then once we've finished with all of that, then you're going to learn how to get a job. I'm going to provide you the information so that you can find out how to go get a job. So thank you for taking these lessons. I look forward to seeing you in the field. You know, the estimator job can lead to bigger things such as project manager, and even if you want to own your own company, you'll start learning how to do that through this. Estimating is the most important part of this, other than actually producing the job. So thank you, and I look forward to seeing you in the field.